if you want to check out the rest of our events as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping, just pop yourself on mute unless you have a question, and if you do have a question, just pop that into the chat functionality as well, just so we can sort of minimize distractions. Feel free to add comments and questions in the chat as we go, and Emma will talk to us about creating routines and rituals for about 30 minutes, and then we'll head into Q&A. So a little bit of background about Emma. She activates personal leadership through powerful daily rituals, routines, and lifestyle strategies to help executives and high-level leaders de-stress, calm their nervous system, and quieten their mind. With over 10 years of wellbeing leadership, Emma is a passionate executive and wellbeing coach, mind detox therapist, and certified Pilates instructor. It's Emma's mission to empower and encourage every person to walk away with some life-changing tools to help them become more successful, more energized, and most importantly, view life in an intentional way. So I'm just going to hand over to you now, Emma, and I'll pop myself on mute. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Renee, and thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be talking for the week of International Women's Day for Striving. So Renee is right, I do want to talk a little bit about routines, rituals, and boundaries during stressful times, and a little bit about give you some tips and tricks on how to, if you're in that state, how to get out of it, why we might be in it, and a little bit of science behind when we get to a stressful state, we can't actually logically get our way out of it. So we'll go into that a little bit deeper. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself and why I have a passion about talking about this particular subject. A little bit about myself and why I feel I'm here is about 15 or 16 years ago now, I was in New Zealand and I almost died from a, excuse me, sorry, I almost died from an autoimmune condition. And so I had that near-death experience, and that was really that was the start of my mission for well-being, body-mind connection, and everything like that. I realized that my body had been giving me signals for years in order for the build-up. So I've learned firsthand how that can happen to us. Sorry, excuse me. So on my journey with that, with my journey with that, I started to get into well-being, I started to get into exercise, and I could see how the body-mind connection is absolutely 100% linked. Then about 4 years ago, I went back to Scotland to see my father, and he got diagnosed terminally ill, and he passed away 4 years ago, and he was a double amputee. He ended up having both legs amputated through illness, and in that time, I knew that I couldn't lose it at that time. We're designed that if we think we have a situation coming up, we'll think that we cannot cope with it. However, when we're in that situation, we are designed to cope with these things. And so in that time, with all my knowledge, I knew that I wanted to be there for my father in order to be strong, in order to not get my autoimmune flared up through stress. So I knew that I had to create routines and rituals and boundaries in my life in order to get through that stage. So that's a little bit about why I am so passionate about this. So I've put a slide up here to rate your current stress levels. If you can just pop in the chat just now, where would you say you're sitting at with your current stress level? Are you a 1? Are you a 5? Are you a 6? Renee, I can't actually see the chat box. Can you read out the numbers if anything is coming up?
Yes, I'll just have a quick look.
Thank you.
We've got a 5 and we've got a 3.
3 is good.
A 7. A 5. I put 1 myself.
Probably a 10 after the start we've just had. Okay, good. So now that I've got a gauge, I've got a good variety of ranges going on there. So with the next one, when we talk about stress is actually multidimensional. And what can happen is when we think that we're stressed, it's very difficult to unpack because it has many different dimensions to it. So for example, anxiety, sadness, grief, irritability, these all can relate to stress. So we've got the stress banner and all these other little side dimensions come down from there. The problem with calling everything stress is it's very difficult to then name and frame, and then it's very difficult to know what tools we need in order to work on what we're going through. And so, for example, people might be feeling some grief especially after COVID, the grief of loved ones. It can be the grief of a job. It can be the grief of a relationship. A lot of people may be feeling anxiety about going back into the workplace or not being in the workplace. But what can happen is we can just call that stress. When we have one of these feelings that comes up, the anxiety or the grief or the exhaustion or whatever's coming up, when we name it, we're actually acknowledging it. And when we try and ignore it, it's almost like a little crying baby. The more you ignore it and the more you leave it, the louder it gets. And so that's why I talk about stress is multidimensional. So if you are feeling stressful, start to get curious and unpack what is it actually that you're feeling. When you start to get to what it is you're feeling, get curious and play around with where is that coming from. And then you can start to frame, name and reframe, frame these feelings. And then you can start to work with it in that way, acknowledging the feeling. I get asked this quite a lot, routines, rituals and boundaries. What are the differences? So basically our routines are what you get up in the morning and you do, and it's the space between different roles and responsibilities that we inhabit in our life. For example, people with children, they might get up in the morning, they might have to get up at a certain time so the children can have their breakfast, so they can be at school on time. People might have a routine where on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they go to the gym because their partner's at home that day with the children, or whatever it is, that's your routine. Rituals, on the other hand, rituals are a lot more personal. They're a lot more sacred to you. It's really about going inward. Routines can be inward, but routines can also be external. But rituals are really going in. What do you need in that time? Is it meditation? Is it breath work? Is it just reflecting? And that's what your rituals are doing. And so you can do your morning ritual, you can have your evening ritual, and they're a lot more internal. When we talk about boundaries, boundaries really are about, as you've all heard, setting the boundaries. And it's really about creating a border and perimeters. And it encourages us to take the space, the time to take aligned action. And so I'm sure we've all got a friend who may be an energy vampire. They just want all the time. And so what you can sometimes do is create a boundary around that. You might only choose to meet them for an hour. You might say, I can meet you at this time. I can meet you 1 till 2. And then you're setting a boundary knowing that you won't come away from that depleted. So all three are really, really important in all of these times of stress. So the next thing I want to talk about is when we are going through stressful times or preempting stressful times, because we also want to prevent these situations arising. So we talk about our values, our needs and our wants. And if anyone is a little bit unsure about this, please do reach out to me. I have a really amazing exercise to do, and it's super simple. And sometimes when we have our values and we've got our needs and our wants, and they're out of alignment, it's very difficult to go with the flow of life. If you put your back out, you're then misaligned. You can't flow properly. You can't lie properly. You may not sleep properly. And so it's the same with our values, needs, and wants. And I want to talk a little bit about our needs and our wants. Our wants, obviously, is what we want to have, and our needs are what we need. Now, when you get crystal clear on your needs and your wants, you can then maneuver or manipulate your values to be in line with that, to be aligned with that. And it's the same as the Be Do Have. So for example, I redid my exercise a couple of weeks ago, and I realized that I had to change one of my values. And I changed one of my values to growth. And so because what I need, and my needs changed to, because in order for me to grow as in business, I need to, and what I realized was I needed to do was exercise daily to maintain my physical and emotional well-being. And so I need to do that in order to grow my business, in order to have what I want. And that is to grow my business in the next 6 months. So before, I didn't have growth as a value. But this year, things have changed. And so therefore, it's really good to take inventory on where you're at. For example, with my father, my value was discipline. And I had never had discipline as a value. But I needed to, in that time, I needed to remain calm, remain strong, be present, and stay healthy in order to be there for my father. So I needed to do that. I didn't want to meditate and have all these niceties and practices. I actually physically needed it at that time. And my value was discipline with my needs in order to have what I wanted. And I knew that I wanted to create good memories, and not have, because I knew that it was going to be a very challenging time. I didn't want to have the rough times present in my mind. So you can see how these needs and values and wants can be really relevant to when you're going through things. Also, we'll go talk a little bit later about it, but sometimes when we get into a state, it's very hard to come out of it. And it's called circuit breakers. Our needs, wants, and values can be a beautiful circuit breaker to get you to realign to what you truly want. It's also Be, Do, Have. Who do you need to be? What do you need to do in order to have what you want to have? So like I say, if anyone wants that exercise, please do reach out. It's quite phenomenal, the outcome you may get. Okay, so here we have, on the left, we've got Cave Woman. And she's representing the historical woman. And on the right, we've got the modern woman. And we've got the juggling woman, and she's representing the modern woman. Now we have these two women, and let's say Cave Woman, maybe 200 years ago. And we've got modern day woman. And one of the problems that we have nowadays is that we are still built and made of the same stuff. So whatever made up Cave Woman has made up modern woman. And I think it's 50 trillion cells, which is a phenomenal amount. And so when we look at our lifestyle now, Cave Woman may have got a little bit stressed. She may have got in fight or flight in order to eat, in order to go and get food, in order to run from a tiger. But the rest of her day, she probably wouldn't have been in fight or flight. Modern day woman, modern day people, who we are now, we have everything layered on. There's working parents, children, families, work, careers, social media. We've got the pressures of always trying to look younger and look good. And how do we fit it in? And the problem with working and living a lifestyle like this is it's quite frantic, and we're not designed for it. If you think about Cave Woman in a car sense, she would have been like a little old Mini, a 1970s Mini. And if you think nowadays, if you were to go and buy a brand new, I don't know, country, whatever it's called, the Mini, the new Mini, the technology has changed, and so we can do more in it. But we're not technology, and we're human. And so now what we're asking our bodies to do is historically not what we're designed to do. And then we're getting burnt out, we're getting depleted, we're having more stress, we're having more anxiety, we're getting more diseases. And we're actually missing the essence of life. The next slide here is before healed and after healed. And what they've found now is when people are at quite a stressful level, and I've done it myself, you can be quite stressed and you think, I'm going to do my exercise routine, or I'm going to go to yoga tonight because it will help, and I'm going to be more present with my children. And we have these things. When we are before healed or modern day woman, what we're finding now is we've got this baseline stress level. And so modern woman, her baseline stress level would be here, day in, day out. Business stress, yep, okay. And her remaining capacity is here. And she has this tiny little window for herself, for her family, for the things that bring her joy. Cave woman over here, on the other hand, might have had to run from a tiger. Business stress, I'm not sure what business stress cave woman would have had. However, her capacity here is far greater. She can feel more present, she'll feel more grounded. And the problem we have is life will always throw us curveballs. And we will drive and head up to here. But the real fundamental issue is when we spend too long in this state. And so when we have a high level base stress, when we have a high baseline stress level here, it's moments like this where, I don't know, the children forget their gym gear, or an email can set you off and just throw you over the edge. And sometimes you can't even understand it. Friends and family might think that's quite a reaction. But it's because it's all that you've got. Your cup is dry. There's nothing in the tank. They did a survey recently. They did a survey a while ago, and they got these mice. And it was for science, and it's pretty cool. So I don't really agree with it. But what they did is they got these mice, and for 10 days solid, for 2 hours solid, 10 days in a row, they scared these mice. They made them fearful, they really antagonized them, and then for 2 hours, and then these mice, at the end of the 10 days, they went in and they measured their amygdala brain. Our amygdala brain is the part of the brain that looks out for danger. Now, what they found was that part of the brain, the amygdala brain, had actually grown. So they took the 10 mice and they put them into a different surrounding, and they would have given them little exercises to do. They would have given them almost like toys to play with, to stimulate them and to calm them and to put them back into what would be their normal environment. And after 10 days, they measured it, and their amygdala had still not come back to regular size. So what it meant was that during that period of time, which is if we stay in the before healed or modern day woman for too long, there is a chance that our amygdala will have grown, which means that even when we're starting to come back here, we're going to be more sensitive to dangers and all sorts of things. And so what we need to do in order to come back down here, the one thing we need to start off with is awareness. And just having awareness that you may know somebody who is living in this state. People usually want a shortcut down to here. And unfortunately, you didn't get here overnight. And there's a very good chance you're not going to get back down to here overnight. And it's like flexing the muscle. If you go to the gym, 6 weeks later, you may notice a little bit of difference. 6 weeks later, you notice another bit of difference, but it's consistency. And you're doing all the good things. And it's the same as here. It's like mind health. When we start to slowly create awareness and come down. The problem here with the amygdala, and this is where the awareness comes in, is the amygdala, what will happen is the prefrontal cortex will say, oh my gosh, why are you reacting? It's just an email, or it's just the kid's lunchbox left on the bench, or whatever it is, a small thing that triggers you. But the prefrontal cortex at this time in this stage is so active, it will take over. Now, the beautiful thing in all of this is we can actually only ever have one conscious thought at a time. That's where the awareness comes in. You then have the ability to choose and understand, this is what is playing out now. My amygdala is trying to take over, my ego is trying to tell me I'm in this state. But when you push forward with the prefrontal cortex, when you push forward with the awareness, when you push forward with a routine, when you push forward with awareness, you then slowly start to balance the seesaw out. The next one we've got here, and I pull the slide up just for you to be aware and to get a little bit curious. We all have different trauma responses, and some people have got different trauma responses to different situations. So start to have a look and just get a little bit curious as to which one you may be. And again, it comes back to this part in the beginning, is when we think about stress as multidimensional. When you start to look at your trauma responses or how you respond to situations, what feeling is coming up for you? So for example, if I was in a situation and I was going to go in for the fight, cave woman might go in for the fight. She might come in with anger and rage and confrontation. But then she may get home to caveman. And then she might go into fawn for whatever reason. She might become people-pleasing, codependency, have lack of boundaries. And start to look at these situations. And it's also really interesting that if you are responding in one sense, for example, at work, and responding in another sense at home, are you really aligned with what's really going on? That brings me back to our wants and needs and values. Where are we aligned? What behaviors do we need to be aware of? What behaviors do we need to do less of? And then also with these trauma responses, your flight, your run away, you might feel anxiety, panic. Again, awareness. If you're in a situation and you've caught yourself and you thought, wow, I've just gone into flight, a flight response, there's no reason to berate, there's no reason to say it's wrong or right, but it's to get curious. Wow, I've responded like that in this situation. Where did I learn to behave like that? What is my belief behind that? For example, we might be in a situation and we might go into a flight response, but we might realize that as a child, it was always easier to run away if there was stresses and strains at home. And so therefore you can start to get curious about, okay, now at this day and age, I'm at this age now, how can I move forward? How can I slowly start to adopt different beliefs, adopt different behaviors? And what ones do I need to let go of? We also have the freeze, which is the shutdown, which is the disassociation, numbness, shutdown, and low energy. So again, when I was back with my father, I was very aware of freeze and shutdown. I absolutely would have gone into that at a certain level. And I certainly went into freeze and shutdown when I came back. But I did it with awareness. So I did it, I was conscious of it, I got the right help around me, and I really worked with it and honored that feeling. My next slide is, if anyone has heard of David R. Hawkins, he is an American philosopher, and he's written some great books. One is called Letting Go, which is phenomenal. And he's got another book, Power to Force. And he talks in that a little bit about how we think we have the power to make these choices, but sometimes it is the force of the universe that will come in and guide us in these ways. I haven't actually read that book yet, but it's on my to-do list, but I've read part of it and it is phenomenal. The reason I pull up this map of consciousness is because when we go back to cave woman and modern day woman, what can happen is when we start to create these awarenesses of our before healed, after healed, our trauma responses, and then we get to here. If we've been living in a state of actually distraction and not acknowledging it, what can sometimes happen is when we start to create awareness and to create little changes in our life, what can sometimes come up is what we call like a lower vibration energy. And even if you find that you're noticing that you're maybe suppressing anger, or you're suppressing grief, or shame is the lowest lowest vibration. And it's the feeling that we can have that draws in the lowest. So if you're walking around with shame, you're pulling yourself down. So again, if you find this, as you start to come through, we start to see anger. And this is why, again, it's so important to recognize what your stress is. Because if you think you're just stressed because of work, but really deep down, there's some experiences in your life that has created an anger response in you that you're not acknowledging. You're going through life at a very low vibration. And what we want to do is all our tools and techniques, which I'll come to, in order to start to lift our vibration higher. And then when you look at the levels of it, down here, sorry, the yellow one's a little bit hard to read, our fear, our guilt, our shame, we become inaction. We don't do anything, a freeze response. But what will happen is the mind will start to tell a story, and you'll start to loop. You may start to loop. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you go for your walk? And you'll start to berate yourself. But then when we start to acknowledge this and be aware, we start to come into anger, desire, we get hyperactivity. And then we've got the beautiful courage in the middle. And then as you start to slowly flex the muscle of self-care, self-love, self-awareness, self-responsibility, whatever word you choose, you will slowly, over time, start to see this energy is lifting. That's why they say you wake up and smell the roses. You'll start to see the beauty in things around you. And the reason I talk about this, because it's not just you're stressed and you can't get out of bed. When you've got the whole science behind what is going on energetically, what is going on mentally, and what is going on in your base, where your base level starts, you are literally swimming upstream with your clothes on. And that's where I really encourage, if you know anyone in that realm or in that space, that I really encourage you to start to show kindness, tenderness, and compassion. And it is just little baby steps. You didn't get to modern day woman overnight, and you're not going to get down to cave woman overnight. It's just slow and continuous actions. So here, the juicy part. What is in your toolbox? So because I've spoken a lot about what can be going on in the body, the mind, energetically, what do we need to do in order to fix this or to start working on it? So in our toolbox, there's many, many things. And if anyone wants me to send anything to you, again, please feel free to reach out. I can absolutely send you out. There's quite a lot that we can do. When we get in these states, our nervous system is a little bit wired. So the first thing we need to do is regulate our nervous system. So start to look at how you can regulate that nervous system. Does it need to be breath work? Does it need to be exercise? We could do meditation, active or guided. There's all these things that we can start to do. Now, your breath work, you can do anywhere. I've got a few other tips that we can do anywhere. A meditation. If you do a Vedic meditation, you get a mantra. You can sit in meetings and replay your mantra. It sends a signal to the brain down to the body, I'm safe. You can even pick a word. You can pick your child's name, your husband's name, your wife's name. You can pick a word, but relate it to being safe, and then you can replay that anywhere. There's another thing that we can do. I'm just going to pull my notes down. There's another thing that we can do, and it's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And again, can pretty much be done anywhere. When our nervous system becomes dysregulated, what often happens is it can be a build-up, and it can also be a long trauma response to something. We might have had a trauma response when we were younger. or even when you had your first job, there can be many reasons why we would have a trauma response. And so what can happen is in that trauma response, our body, our cells, at the time of the trauma, will hold on to it. So it's in our bones, it's in our cells. And we have these receptors that go from the body to the mind. And when we're in this realm, what happens is we're 20% in the head, 80% in the body. So when we're trying to calm our nervous system down and regulate it, and we talk about it, it's only really logically talking 20% out of what is happening, which means we've still got the 80% in the body. So if you have a trauma response, which is sending your nervous system into a heightened state, you can say logically all you want, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. But if you don't do the body work, it means that, for example, if you got attacked by a dog when you were little, as you grow up, you know, I'm okay, I'm safe to be around dogs. But every time you see a dog, your body will react in that way. So then again, you're going against the grain. You're trying to tell yourself you're okay, but your body's reacting. So we need to get this trauma out of the body. We need to work with the body. And one of the ways to do that is when we can be in our head is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And what you do is you get 5 things you can see. And when you're consciously doing, remember, you can only have one thought at a time. So you're breaking the circuit. I am going to choose 5 things that I can see. I can see my water glass. I can see my phone. I can see my candle. I can see my laptop. And I can see my essential oil. And then 4 things that you can feel. And again, you can be in a meeting. You can feel your glass. You can feel your mouth. 3 things that you can hear. Even if you take a drink, you can hear yourself. Can you hear birds in nature? 2 things you can smell. Can you smell your skin? Can you smell an oil? Can you smell a hot tea that you've just made? And then one of the things is 1 thing you can taste. Take a sip of your water, have something for lunch, and see what you can taste. And what that is doing is it's breaking the circuit of the overactive nervous system that is taking off, and it's creating an awareness to bring you back into the present moment. And again, awareness. Okay, that's just happened. I've just regulated myself. Another thing that I've got is really good is just under the collarbones, we have these pressure points. So we run our fingers down to our collarbones, and just slightly underneath there, you'll find almost like a little groove in the skin. And this is actually a pressure point used by kinesiologists and acupuncturists. And you can just softly rub on there, followed by breath work. And then that can just calm the nervous system down. And again, whatever's going on, you may want to say, I am safe. You may want to say, I belong. You may want to say, I am enough. You may want to say whatever you want. And then continue with breath work. And you will still slowly start to feel your body just slow down. There's a great technique that I do give a lot of my clients, which is I find I have great results with. And apologies if I yawn straight away. It's really, again, it's about creating awareness of when we get into our head, we can only see out. We have lost connection to our body, and we have lost the awareness that we are this being standing here. So we want to bring it back inwards. So you clasp your hands, you send the palms out towards you, reaching up towards the sky, and then interlock the hands behind the head. And then what you do is you keep your head straight, but you gaze your eyes towards your right elbow, and you hold this position until you sigh or till you yawn. You hold your head straight, and then you look to the left side, again to the left elbow, keeping the head straight. And then you will see or hear a little sigh. And again, that is bringing the peripheral vision back into the center line of the body. So that is just a couple of things that you can do, and they're really effective. Another thing that I suggest that you do, and again, can be done anywhere. It's about creating the awareness of our environment. So again, doesn't matter where you are, if you're sitting in the car, if you feel something's triggered you, what to do is bring your awareness and look at something. It can be a tree, it can be your computer screen. I try and recommend not technology. It can be a glass. Focus in on that object and then start to become aware of the space that is between you and the object. This is a phenomenal exercise to do if you can do it with a tree or with nature, because the vast size of them. And so then you create this space, but what it does, again, takes your awareness out of what you think is danger, and it brings back into the mind and back into the body. So it's connecting all the way down. There's one other slide that I wanted to show you that I have found through periods of my life, and I'm sure we've all had it, when you just feel so on the edge, you feel so wound up, you're so frustrated, you're tired, all these things are going wrong, and you're just really not having a good time. And you talk to someone and they say, why don't you do some breath work? And I've certainly been there when I had thought I need more than breath work. And what can happen is, with our 6 emotions that we have, anger, what is the other one? Judgment, fear, happiness, and there's 2 others. And these are what our basic emotions are. And what an emotion is, it's energy in motion. So our emotions are our energy in motion. Now, if you have rage or anger or fear, and you try and breathe your way out of it, that doesn't always work. What I suggest you do is, for 1 minute, and this is so powerful, and make sure it's a pillow, nothing else but a pillow. What you do is you get a pillow, time yourself for a minute, and with all the energy that you have, you punch that pillow for a minute. You can also get in the car and scream. You can do things like that, but what you want to do is you want to get this emotion, you want to get this energy, this anger or this fear, you want to get it out. And then when you have released that energy, there's a good chance you'll have a big cry. You may or may not. Some people go into hysterics of laughter after this. But again, laughing, it can release energy. Crying can release energy. And then you can start with your breath work. So again, with all this, it's not one glove fits all or one size fits all. And it's certainly not, once you've got this set in stone, this is what you do for the rest of your life. Because life will always throw you a curveball. And sometimes you may need to get up in the morning and go for your run and not meditate. And sometimes you may just need to punch the pillow instead of breath work. And so it's really about getting to that stage where you come back and you really honor yourself, honor what you're feeling, and just ask yourself, what do I need right now? How am I feeling? To warn you also is that when you start to do things like this, it can be quite confronting and it can feel quite uncomfortable. So it really is little baby steps. It's just acknowledging, if you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. Note that you feel uncomfortable, go away, and you can come back to it. And then just get curious. And that's why I think journaling can be such a powerful tool to do, or a practice or a ritual to do. Because when you start to journal, you then have this book, this confirmation that you can go back to, and you can see how far you've come. It's flexing the muscle. You might go to the gym, you might start a new gym routine, and you might go for 4 weeks and you can't notice anything. And then someone says to you, you look different, you look amazing. But you can't see it because you're in it all the time. And that's why if you do start to change or create a different routine or a different ritual, or you decide you want to really try and minimize some of the stress in your life, journaling is such a powerful way, because it gives you that, when you get to that point of thinking nothing's working, nothing's changing, you can then look back and you realize that things are actually shifting and changing. And then the other thing is nourishing your body. Are you feeding your stress, or are you calming it? So quite often we will cool down the night with wine and heat it up in the morning with coffee, which is, it's almost like a numbing sensation and then a highly activating sensation. And again, it's not to berate, it's not to judge, it's not to do anything. We've all done it. We'll probably all still do it at times, but it's just having that awareness. If you're going to reach for that glass of wine at night, do it consciously. If you're doing it to numb a pain, just get a little bit curious as to what you're numbing. If you just want to have a glass of wine because you're out with your friends and you're having a really nice restaurant, absolutely have it and enjoy it. But also start to look at what you are feeding your body. Some foods might be more stressful than others. Your caffeines, your various, you've got your, I think it's the Dirty 30 or the Dirty 13, and I can send it to anyone that wants it. And it's all about the fruits that are high in it's what they get polluted by. And so it's really about looking at those fruits and those vegetables. Is that going to add to calm my body? If it's full of pesticides and all these things, probably not. What vegetables can I buy that's not on that list? Quite an old common list, actually. And really just getting aware. I started to be aware, if I eat something and I feel really bloated after, and I never do, is it the food or is it the stress? If you're in a stressful time and you know that you will be in this for a while, and sometimes we need to be in these situations. And that's why when I go back to my toolbox, if I know, I predict in my next 6 months, I'm going to be hugely stressed. And so already I'm starting now. What can I do? What can I up? I can up my exercise. I can up my meditation. I can do these things. But during that time, I will eat foods that are almost like soul food, good for the soul. So again, it's just about acknowledging where you're at, creating awareness, getting curious, and making sure that you're in alignment. And then my last one is, if anyone does want to connect with me, here's my mobile, my email, and my Instagram. And if anyone does want that needs and wants exercise, then please do reach out. I'm happy to share that with you. And then if anyone's got any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was fantastic. I don't see any questions here. Oh, hang on. We've got some comments. Laurelyn said, I love that pressure point. Thanks for showing us that. I think that's going to be one of my go-tos now. And Carly Brooks said, may I please get all the additional info? This session is great. Hopefully the recording is sent around so I can re-watch it. Yes, definitely. We'll make all the recording available on the platform and send that out to you as well. Were there any other questions? If you do, just pop something into the chat. I have a question around a mantra. You mentioned mantra, and I was just wondering what that is. Was that along the lines of the 5 things I can see, the 4 things I can feel, or is a mantra something different to that?
No, so a mantra can be a word, and what you generally want a mantra to be is more like a sound, so it's more a feeling.
Okay.
So for example, the universal one is Om. You can say Om, I can visualize it in my head, but you want to feel it come into the body. So for example, that's why you might go Om, and then you'll feel the vibration. So you can do that out loud, but a mantra really, and so for example, if you were to go in the morning and you were to have a mantra in your meditation and think, this is my day, this is my time, and use your mantra, Om, or I am safe. You can do, or I am safe is more an affirmation, but a mantra can be more like a sound or a feeling. And it can just be a hum. You can do it on a walk, you can do it anywhere. And what that does is brings the mind also into the body. And what you can do is so once you get used to your mantra and you find it and you know that it resonates with you, you can be in certain places and obviously no one knows, and you can just in your head feel the vibration or think of the word that you are having, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
The 5 things are more to do with when you're really outward and you need to bring yourself back in.
Yeah.
And so we've got 5 energetic fields. So we're actually all about this size, all around there. So if anyone was to come within this reach to me, they're going to feel my energy, which is why sometimes if you hug someone and their energy is a little bit low, you can start to feel it. And energy, they get another top trick is that if you go to nature, if you feel like you've had a bad day, or if you feel you've been in a room or an environment that just wasn't very clean and inviting, get to nature. And because if we're even standing by a tree or get in the water and have an intention, ask the universe, please, just rid me of this toxin, rid me of this toxins, rid me of this energy. And what happens is, because we are all energy, that when you look at nature, its energy is always of a higher vibration. So with the size of us, we walk into nature, its energy will almost like wash over us, which is why, have you ever felt like you've had a bad day and you get in the ocean, or you put your toes in the sand, or you walk in nature, and then you feel better? It's because that is actually lifting your vibration that way. So your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Renee, is about when you're out there, is bringing it back in. And your mantra is more like a feeling.
Okay, I like that. Another thing I've been trying to do is, instead of trying to think positively, because I have a thing about, busy, 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 and the circular thinking, is to try and think neutrally as much as I can, or a little bit of that's outside of my control, to stop that kind of frenetic sort of overthinking as well. I saw that you had, in terms of all the different phases, you had being neutral as one of those.
Yes, being neutral. And sometimes when we overthink things, it can be a distraction from feeling. So in those situations, I'd invite you to do breath work. I'd invite you to get curious. What's happening here? And I work with a monk in the UK, and it's so interesting and how they think. And what we're actually designed is to have one thought to come in and then to go. And really, our emotions are only designed to last 30 to 90 seconds. But what happens is we get an emotion, and then the feeling on top of that is the story we attach to that emotion. And then the story becomes bigger. And before you know it, you've got this emotion going on for an hour, going on for a day, going on for a week, going on for 6 months. And we're still looping and looping. But we're not designed to be like that. So that's why I talk a lot about get into your body. The head will make up stories, and it will also, because you can only have that one thought. If you're in your head, if you're in that lower vibrations, your stories will go tenfold, and you will loop and you will loop and you will loop. But it's the 80-20. As soon as you connect into the body and get a little bit curious, that will then start to slow it down a little bit. There's a really good thing I do in the mind detox sessions that I do. We can go into overthink, overfeel, overtime, overdo, and there's one other that I actually should know. And with the overthink, I ask them to say to themselves, is it real, relevant, and required? So when you start to overthink, and again, if you take one thing away from today, let it be awareness. As soon as you start on awareness, it changes everything. And if I was to be in a loop, about something, and I create awareness, is it real? So someone may send me an email. Is it real? Yes, they sent me the email. Is it relevant? It's not relevant. And is it required? Is this thought required? If someone responds in a way. And the other thing I ask people to do is have compassion for others. Because so often we get consumed in our heads about what we think others are thinking of us. But remember, we're all in the same boat. We've all come through a pandemic. We're all exhausted from it. We're all got a lot of stress going on. We all sometimes feel like we don't belong. We all sometimes feel like we're not good enough. We all fear rejection. We're all in this together. And so if you're in a workplace and someone responds to you in a way, this was game changing for me. I was the ultimate people pleaser, which led to me having Crohn's. which I'm now in remission because I've realized I don't need to people please anymore. And so it's I've totally lost my train of thought there, but it's I've totally lost my train of thought there. Anyway.
No, it's fine. I think what you were saying, a lot of what you were saying about being real, relevant, and required was
Yes.
really kind of almost framing a situation or something that you might identify as a threat or a conflict. It's sort of framing it and almost reframing it a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're real, relevant, and required. So if you're in a situation at work or somewhere and your boss or someone sends you an email or they're consistently doing it and you take that on board, but that's actually not yours to take on board. If you have done something that, if you haven't shown up at work, if you're not putting your best foot forward, I invite you to do your values, wants and needs, because are you aligned for that company straight away? But if not, if someone is being reactive towards you, first things first, it's not yours. And secondly, get curious. If in your heart of hearts, you know that you've done a good job and that is really not, it's not real, it's not relevant, it's not required, start to just show a little bit of compassion because you actually don't know what they're going through. And so that's why I work with quite a few executives and they come and they talk about their teams and how they behave and all these things. And quite often they come to me not in the healthiest of states because they feel the pressure, but they can't show it. So again, we have a little bit of compassion for people. But again, it's when you come back into yourself, when you know that you're doing the best that you can, when you know that you're aligned, when you're almost solid in yourself. Think of yourself as a tree trunk. If you had a little wispy tree and then someone came in with a comment, you might bend over. Someone comes in with another comment, life throws you a curveball. You want to, as a tree does, it starts off spindly and little, and the more that we ground ourselves, the more that we cleanse our energy, the more that we do these things, our tree gets thicker and solid. And then these things won't blow you over quite so much. Your regulating your system will be easier, and everything will come back to a more centered place.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Emma. That's been a great session today. Thanks everyone for attending. I encourage you to attend the other IWD events that we're having this week. That's just at the top of the chat. And I encourage you also to follow Emma on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much, Emma. It's been
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.